All right, we are recording. So yes, today we are making some chocolate fondue together. I have the recipe in the chat, um, and we're just gonna slowly go through this together. I do already have water that is hot on the stove, so we're gonna just start off by melting the chocolate. Now, chocolate loves to get grumpy if you heat it too fast. I don't know if anybody has ever had that experience of you're heating chocolate directly in a pan on the stove, or maybe you microwave it for too long, and it turns into this sort of dry, crumbly nonsense. Um, that can happen with chocolate. So we're going to make this a little bit easier on ourselves. We're going to use a double boiler today. If you're doing it at home and you want to use a microwave or some other situation, go for it, but I'm going to demo it with a double boiler. And so I'm going to shut off the boiling water that I have in here already and remove the lid. I have my chocolate chips. Behave. I have my chocolate chips in a canning jar already measured out here. And you'll see that the recipe has about 6 ounces of chocolate chips, which is about a cup. And then we're going to add to that a teaspoon or two of oil. Now, I could measure it out. Certainly, measuring spoons exist for a reason, but if you do bake a lot, this particular part is not going to be so fussy. I would encourage you to use oil. I'm using an olive oil here because olive oil and chocolate is one of my favorite combinations. Um, if you use butter, it has a little bit of water in it, and having water in your chocolate can make it more prone to that dry, crumbly situation that I was talking about before. Um, a lot of times when people do chocolate fondue, they do it as a ganache where they're using a lot of heavy cream, or maybe not a lot, but they're using some heavy cream. And I wanted to avoid that just because not everybody can eat dairy. And so this could be a slightly more flexible option. Also, you have access to different oils. You could choose a heart healthy one if that helps with your goals. So I'm going to take my jar. This is a canning jar, so I don't have to worry too much about it being put into my hot water. If I wanted to be especially careful though, and I wasn't doing this with a 15-minute time limit, I would just stick my jar in my water with the chocolate chips and oil in it from the very beginning. Um, so we're gonna stick this in now. I don't have a trivet in the pan, and I apologize that you can't see the pan itself very well. I don't have a trivet to put in, so I'm just gonna put in a little washcloth so I don't have direct contact with the bottom of the pan. That can also help. And we're putting in our chocolate, giving it a moment to melt. Every once in a while, I'll stir it. And so it melts more evenly. The slow but even melting makes chocolate very happy. And we like chocolate. We want to keep chocolate happy. So remember, go slow. Chocolate hates water, and oil helps make it foolproof. Um, Next, while we're waiting for the chocolate to melt, we're going to prepare some dippers. And what I mean by dippers is whatever you/your family members would like to dip in the chocolate. We had a bunch of different combinations, flavor combinations in the chat. So if you do like chocolate and peanut butter together or chocolate and nuts, you could try dipping some nuts in your chocolate. You could make like a peanut butter ball by adding some sort of a starch, or I've even seen people use milk powder if you can consume dairy with peanut butter to help solidify it, or cocoa powder. That's the other one that I've seen people use so that you get that texture that you can make into a ball, and then pop them in the freezer for a few minutes, and then you could dip them in your chocolate. You can also use fruit slices, and oh, not slices, fruit chunks or nuts. I have some walnuts here. I have a banana, some, aged like fine wine, this guy. Um, and why I said chunks rather than slices for fruit is because anywhere that your fruit is wet, don't forget chocolate hates water. Anywhere your fruit is wet, the chocolate isn't going to stick as well. So we do want the chocolate to stick. And when I do a banana, I don't, even though using a knife would be prettier, I personally prefer to just break chunks so we don't have a wet side here. Let me, since the chocolate's taking its sweet time to melt, I'll just show you the difference. Maybe you can see the glossy, glossy difference. Um, but you see how this is just very different? Nah, I don't know if you can see. In any case, this banana that I used a knife on is wetter. This banana that I broke is drier. And the reason is you ruptured some cell walls when you use a knife. So this, it broke along, cell lines. So banana chunks and also strawberries. Just remember, if you do have gigantic strawberries, I know strawberries and chocolate are a very common, lovely combination. If you do have strawberries that you want to reduce the size of, they're just massive. Just remember to cut them in such a way that you don't have to have the wet side down. You could always have like a wet side up as you're dipping things. So something to play with there. However, I have a bonus strawberry idea for you, or bonus frozen fruit idea, is you can always use frozen strawberries, and that will solidify the chocolate. This might be inflammatory to that magic shell person who does not like magic shell. I don't know. This might really, really not do it for you. But if I take these little strawberries, the chocolate is going to solidify around the strawberry and stick really, really well. Maybe if I really love chocolate, I get a thicker coating that way. That could be a very great thing for me. Now, I also want to point out, oh, I should probably stir my chocolate, but I also want to point out that as you're choosing what you're going to dip, your actions can match your priorities, right? You can eat a whole host of things here. They could be really, really great sources of fiber and antioxidants, or they don't have to. So if you're planning for a crowd or planning for different people with different goals, this can be a really nice hosting option. Or maybe you just have family members with a lot of opinions, right? That's great. This is a very flexible recipe. So I hope it is a fun way for you to take in some nutrients that are really great for your body. So let's give this guy a stir. I am stirring with a fork just because I'm going to use a fork later on to make this a little lower cleanup. We recycle our implements. Now that's coming along nicely. It's been in the water for about 5 minutes. I'll just show you what stage it's at here. So maybe you could see it's lumpy, but it's melty. So we still have some whole chocolate chips. And we'll give it another moment in the hot water there. So when I was saying that I'm going to use a fork for dipping, I've dipped a lot of things in chocolate. Chocolate and I sometimes get along and sometimes don't when I'm cooking with it. But I went through a whole chocolate covered cherry phase where I made a lot of those. And I found forks to be great for dipping, just a normal table fork, not a special fondue fork. And the reason why I personally prefer a regular fork is if I were to try and use a chocolate fondue fork, like those little two-prong things, and stab it into my walnut, the odds of it breaking my walnut in half and irking me are relatively high. But if I use a fork, I can just sort of scoop with the fork, tap off some extra chocolate. I can dunk it entirely, and then toss it on my plate and eat it. So that's how I tend to do this. If you have fondue forks and you really enjoy them, you're a human with free will, and that is not illegal. But oh yeah, chocolate chopsticks are a great idea. Absolutely. So, choose your own adventure. Don't buy things that you don't need to, for this recipe also. Um, oh, see some good engagement in the chat. Fighting words, dark chocolate by itself is not sweet enough. Yeah, and when you're choosing the chocolate, you can choose dairy-free chocolates. You can choose chocolates that are sweeter or more dark. I'm using semi-sweet chocolate chips today just because I didn't want the extra work of chopping a bar of chocolate, but different chocolates really do taste different, and you may well find one that you absolutely love. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll hate it just because it's dark. Um, there just like coffee, there is a lot of nuance in those flavors, depending on how they're processed, where they're grown, all of those kinds of things, which can get very, very interesting very quickly if you like that food science aspect. All right, let's see where we're at here. All right, so I've got a good melt going on, good enough that I can bring it over and show you all. Now we could drizzle like this. Hopefully you can see that all right. And then what I was talking about, let me see if I can actually demonstrate this. So I've submerged my walnut in my chocolate, and then I just scoop it with a fork like this, and then I just tap off the extra. And I'm gonna put it on a plate. Dun, dun, dun. Bloop. And then what you can do, hopefully you can see, make a nice little swirly with your fork if you want. Sometimes I like to make my food pretty because it feels even more like a treat. I mean, it's chocolate, so it already feels like a treat, but even more like a treat is not bad. Now, to actually be able to dip things in this chocolate, we're going to need to have more chocolate melted than we actually need for my chocolate fondue moment, right? Very difficult to have exactly the right amount of chocolate. So what I do is I pour the extra into, and maybe somebody is already saying this in the chat, but I'll pour the extra either into a sheet pan or sometimes even just like a Tupperware. Sometimes I'll throw down parchment paper, or if I'm out of parchment paper and I throw it into a Tupperware, when I want to take it out, I'll just run hot water over the backside and have my hand underneath to catch it, or the lid. But then once it's solidified into a flat sheet, you could just break it up and use it like you would use chocolate chips. If I know that I'm going to eat more chocolate fondue later, I can also just keep the extra to use the next time. It'll heat a little slower and you'll have to stir it just a little bit more, or sometimes try and break up the chunk. There's a big one in the bottom. But um, you don't have to waste the chocolate that you've used for your event today. Why do a chocolate episode when some people are still on New Year's diets? Well, I'm not suggesting that you dip potato chips in here, or, whatever foods that you're trying to avoid. But it is good to remember that there are ways to get in your nutrients, take things in. Oh yeah, moderation has entered the chat as well. Um, yeah, it's good to choose your own adventure, know how to make healthy foods really enjoyable. And I do see we have some fun suggestions to dip chocolate bars into chocolate. Um, you know, actions meet priorities. Just make them align, whatever that means for you. All right, hopefully we have a good way to engage with our nutrients. Does anybody have questions about this recipe? And if you put them earlier in the chat and I missed them, just put them again at the bottom. I'm doing a very quick scan. All right, so that will conclude today's recipe demonstration. I am going to drop into the chat a survey for you all, just to get your feedback on this. So hopefully that will help us have better events in the future. I've also dropped in instructions so that you can log your points for attending this event if you're participating in Personify Health. And yeah, it's time for lunch. Enjoy the rest of your day. Take care, everybody.
Thanks. Thanks, Sophie.
Thank you.